everybody, and welcome back to Seeking Play. In today's episode, we were joined by the wonderful Dr. Katrin Heimann. Dr. Heyman is an assistant professor at the Centre for Educational Development at Aarhus University, where she researches and develops facilitation tools and resources for engaging and inclusive classrooms within academia. Katherine is one of the leading experts in the interview and analysis technique of micro-phenomenology, with which she has investigated an extensive range of experiences, especially those related to art, creativity, play, and learning. Katherine has an extensive range of research, and we would also like to highlight that Katherine wrote a chapter for a really interesting book that was recently published called Practicing Embodied Thinking in Research and Learning.
Now, having watched our conversation with Katherine again, we've taken 3 quotes we really liked. So the first one is, playfulness has much to do with listening, being present, and engaged in your environment so we can understand others. The second quote is, adult playfulness is a state of mind in which you give up agency and dive into an engagement with somebody. And the third, which was actually the end of our conversation, so a lovely way to end, it was, play is the best way of being. We had a wonderful conversation. Katherine was a great sport and posted her Lego, and she built out some really creative answers. So we hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Take care, folks.
Take care, folks. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to season 2 of the Seeking Play podcast. We are very excited this morning to have our first guest of the second season, Kat Heimann. So today we're really excited to talk all things play with Kat, and we thank you very much, Kat, for taking the time this morning to come onto our podcast.
Great pleasure.
So Kat, I am going to kick things off this morning, and I am going to take you back to your earlier childhood. Can you share with our listeners, what were you like as a kid?
Yeah, I was very surprised when I saw this question first, and I love it. I was first thinking about me as a toddler, right? As a very small child and a primary school child. And I think there I was like a very, very happy child. I was really like, whatever you would suggest me to do, I would be in. And I was like super smiley and stuff. Things got a bit complicated a bit later. I think like I was really, really, really keen on learning because of, so this yes and was also towards teachers and adults and stuff. And that caused some trouble in school. And then I was also slightly overweight before I came into puberty, and that was kind of like very difficult. So I think I became quite like restricted there. And I also actually really fought with my body image later in life. So that kind of left some traces in terms of my as a big passions for fighting against discrimination and also combining play always with care.
Fantastic.
I think that segues nicely into our second question, in that, like, if you can recollect, in your youth, are there any bumps, breaks, scars, bruises, or adventures that tell an interesting story of your childhood that you think contribute to your sense of identity now as an adult?
Yeah, I think these like mixtures out of like this natural joy and then like this restrictions that came from social environments that does contribute to my story, and especially where I have moved today. And I think actually that my biggest adventures I experienced far later in life when I rediscovered playfulness after quite a bumpy youth route. I definitely don't want to go back to my teens. Like everything after 27 is like amazing, but like not earlier, please.
That's so interesting. And you know what? It's an interesting one when you say that during a challenging childhood, it's probably play that's needed most. And oftentimes it's probably thing that kids lack. It's that desire to want to engage and play, which is kind of therapeutic in itself. Because I can attest to that. I can attest to a challenging childhood where not wanting to engage with others and be social didn't work in my favor. Now I can retrospectively see.
Especially even now.
There were some exceptions, right? Like I remember that in my teens, I had actually really amazing group of friends outside of school, which was this difficult space, I think, the school, that I knew from dancing and from role play, gameplay, right? And I remember, so for me, like play has to do with other people, right? So you can, of course, be playful with yourself and stuff, but like playing in community is like far better, right? And I remember them doing this like fantastic thing of organizing a treasure hunt for my birthday that I didn't know about, like driving with tram and then going out at a stop, not knowing what happened, and somebody ran past me with a huge present, and somebody else of my friends ran behind, yes, my present, and I had to run after. So it was not like I didn't have a bad like youth or childhood, but there were these bumps and struggles with like this discrimination.
Katherine, Kat, can I take you back to your earlier career? So when you were starting out in your career, what advice would you give to your younger self about either being more serious or more playful in how you thought or interacted with other individuals?
I would definitely give myself the advice to be more playful always. It doesn't matter how playful I feel like. But I think sense of playfulness is not like this like whimsical being or something like that. I think playfulness for me has a lot to do, or that's what I'm thinking about right now a lot in my work, with listening, like being very present, right? And being engaged in your environment in a way that you really try to understand what the other one is saying. And that kind of like affords a lot of stillness and patience and also braveness, because there are like roughnesses and things in this, and sometimes it's hurtful to hear something. And so but this attitude of saying, yes, I'm going to do this with you, I'm listening to you, I want to engage with that, right? Trusting that you have like navigation possibilities, right? Yes, and doesn't mean that you give up everything, right? So I think that is, I would always give that advice to myself.
And that's so interesting. It's again, like we're on this kind of play odyssey now for a number of years, and play as attention is something that I don't think is expressed enough. It's lovely to hear you talk about it in that, the act of being playful with another, but their thoughts, their ideas, their identity, and your identity too. I don't know if we've coined a phrase, but we call it playing attention instead of paying attention. Yeah. It's like you're kind of like playing into the attention of something else. So I'm lovely to hear you specifically call that out. It's me now, is it right? The question. I'm just so engrossed in your answers. I'm losing track. So how do you balance taking your work seriously while also not taking it too seriously? Trying to strike a balance between that.
I know I have prepared that question, but now I'm actually thinking, when you say it like that, I'm thinking about it a bit differently. So I'll improvise, okay? Yeah. Well, I think I always take my work very seriously. As an academic, I know that I have a luxurious work, right? I can do what I really burn for, what I really long for, what is my interest, and I also take my task as a teacher in academia very, very serious. I think this is my big passion, to teach not in this hierarchical way of like providing knowledge, but to interact with other people in learning activities and to facilitate engagements. And I take that super serious. So I'm always over prepared and actually anxious in this. And there's this wonderful book by Palmer called The Courage to Teach. It takes a lot of courage to teach, right? Because you need to open, in a good teaching, in my sense, the room for anything to happen. You have to let go of control, like, right? So because otherwise you create hierarchies and people feel just like fat with knowledge. So that is scary because you cannot prepare, right? It's like, and you have a big task of emotional handling, your own emotions, right? Also when you don't know something and these kind of things, and the emotions of the students, especially when you deal with topics that are in my passion, like categories of differences of class, race, gender, or things like that. And it's very scary, and but it is my big passion, so I take it hyper seriously, I think. But there are borders. What I don't want to deal with toxic situations. Like if I realize I'm in a group where there are conflicts underlying that are, that I don't understand and that we cannot like solve. And when there's behavior in the room and where or when I discover a trigger in me that is like where I think, okay, this is not going to work, then I start to learn that to retreat and just say, okay, this is this is not going to be a playful interaction. And because these discussions often get super sterile or the interactions, right? Because everybody is like, tapping on eggshells. And I think this kind of seriousness and sense of like unsolvable conflicts, and that's not something I want to engage in.
I think the fact you said like it's an unresolvable conflict. I mean, you're not there to try and solve it in the hour or 2 or 3 that you're with a class. And I understand, it can totally derail any value of those people being together, be it online or in person. I would just speak from my experience. I had a short foray into academia, like 4 years, and I found I had to soften. It took me time to soften out because I had the persona of the sage on the stage. I think it's called the academic who's all knowing. And once I could start to become more of me, it became an environment where everybody was beneficial. And so I completely get, and I think it's such a brave step. And we're going to talk about a research paper later about playfulness in academia. But I think I just want to acknowledge those playful academics, 1 and 2. Definitely, it's a brave act. It's
important, Kat, what you said as well. Like letting go, walking into a room and being open to anything happening and emerging. Obviously, within your own control, but there's a certain level of vulnerability as well that you may not always have the answers, and that's great, because isn't it wonderful that you have collaboration in a room with diverse students and different minds? So I think it's fantastic as a lecturer or someone in academia taking that approach as well, that they're not just going to dominate the class with all of their own information. So it's fantastic. I'm definitely going to check out that book that will be linked in the show notes that you suggested.
Yes.
The courage to teach.
The courage to teach. I can send you a picture later.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful, wonderful resource. So I would love to pick your brains and ask you, what does adult playfulness mean to you?
It's a big question when you ask an academic, because so many different discussions come up for me. I mean, playfulness in academia has been discussed either as a state of mind or as a character trait. And I think both has their, pros and cons and truths and affordances. But I actually like to consider it as a state of mind that you can get in. And some people can have an easier time, and some people have a harder time and need more facilitation. We all need a bit of facilitation. There are conditions that play against it. But it's a state of mind in which you can, in my definition, give up agency and really dive into an engagement with somebody or something, trying out possibilities together with this other agent, human or non-human, that alone you would not have, and finding surprise in the solutions that you find together, and therefore getting very motivated and joyful in continuing this interaction.
I love it. Again, for us now, like these particular words start to pop up. So previously we mentioned like attention and even agency. So I think agency, and it's been mentioned in season 1 a number of times as well. And it's probably not a word we would have used prior to us starting out learning about play. It's and it's also, I think, to your point, it's changed in that it's your own agency, but there's a kind of an intermingling, intra-relationship where kind of this co-created agency emerges between. I just want to pick up a point you said. It's between people and non-people. What do you mean by non-people? What were you thinking there when you said that?
Well, I think that we have too long considered humans as superior to our other to all the other agents we share the world with, right? Be it animals, plants, but also objects and things, or and all the things that do not fit the categories like mushrooms and lichen and whatever bacteria, right? We are surrounded by so many things that play with us all the time, and in my experience, the interaction with an object, a Lego brick, a stone, something can be as agency mixing as when I play with another person.
I love that. Again, as you start to read about play and its different perspectives on it, for me, one word when I'm kind of looking out into the world is interplay. I think you were kind of alluding to that, like the interplay of again, just material objects and people and like mycelium. And, I think that play is an engagement with you're kind of reintegrating yourself back into the ecology. And for me, the word interplay, I think I had it when I was like going for a run, having read a book, and I was looking out onto a river and a field and birds and me. And I was just, it's like, yeah, we're kind of all interconnected. And I think you can read that from a more ecological perspective, but looking at it through play, it was a different way for me to think about it. The word interplay kind of, and sometimes I wonder, am I being too romantic about like, oh, everything is but I think I'd like to hear your thoughts. Is that an overly romantic view of play, as in interplay between everything? Am I just smashing play on top of everything?
Not in my opinion. I think I came a long way. A lot of the things that I say today, I would have probably called esoteric 10 years ago or something. But like I did a series of interviews recently where I asked people to go out in nature and use a score that I borrowed from a Danish artist, Christine Fens. Ask yourself the question, what if everything you senses you back? And one of the experiences that people share when they just stand there, ask themselves that question, right, is, for example, that the touch of the wind is suddenly experienced as a touch. So what if the wind actually touches me, right? Like in this human sense of touching, right? Like, and that means it does that all the time. And via this wind, I'm connected to everything, right? And they're beautiful, I think. You could call them romantic, but they're also deeply beautiful and joyful and experiences that I very much enjoy diving into these days.
I love that. Okay, so yes to interplay and esoteric considerations.
No, they're actually not esoteric. It's not what I want to say. They're just like what is out there.
So, you're right. And look, I think again, I feel like for me again, this kind of softening of the self. I think partly as an adult, when you start to realize that you can be playful, and an identity of being playful, it just feels like you kind of breaking down another barrier. And in doing so, you're connecting into other things. Like you used the word affordances a number of times. So like this way of being creates affordances. And I think that way of playfully starting to consider the world that you're in, just because you're considering yourself as being playful, I think it kind of like the cognitive aspect of it and then the 4E cognitive aspect of it starts to connect.
Absolutely. And I do think that there are new affordances created if you think about the wind as an agent, right? Then you actually can play with it, right? So then you can see what happens if you orientate your face in another way. Like, does it do something to you? Can you actually play with the wind, right? And you can see kids doing that intuitively, right?
Yes.
Like, and
Yes.
we kind of like lose this as an adult in that sense, right? Like, but it's there, and these tiny scores and activities, they often give the world different affordances that you can then use to play.
And Katherine, in terms of perspectives, we provide listeners with a variety of different play quotes, and you've picked out some yourself that you would like to share.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't actually pick a direct quote, but I when I was reading the quotes from your list, there was one quote. Oh, can you remind me?
I think it was Sarah Simkin's quote about play and vulnerability.
Absolutely. And I was very intrigued by that quote because I really think that vulnerability is something that you need when you start listening, right? Like, because listening again means being touched by something, right? And it also means that you speak your truths, right? And so you get vulnerable in both, in this letting yourself be touched and like allowing somebody to know something. And these things. And I think this was really important when I read that. I was very glad when I read that quote, but I was really missing some of my deepest inspirations on this tiny mural. I mean, you couldn't have done this, right? But I have been so inspired in my work by some Black feminist writers like Audre Lorde, by Bell Hooks, Sarah Ahmed, and also contemporary, more contemporary, they're all contemporary, but more contemporary people like Adrienne Mary Brown or his sister Alexis Pauline Gams, who all have this beautiful writing that argues not only for important political deconstruction of our work, but also of creative reconstruction of this work. Mm-hmm. And they all argue about the importance of joy and pleasure. Adrienne Mary Brown brought out this book that I really highly recommend that is called Pleasure Activism. And this book, it is, of course, framed in a very different intersectionality. There she promotes pleasure and joy as ways of activism out of deeply discriminatory circumstances, but they are so illuminating and so joyful to read, so that I think they can and they should be applied to any intersectionality. This is just something that I thought like, oh, I want to tell them that they should probably reach out for her. I mean, she's probably far too busy to get into this podcast, but like she's so amazing in her writing and the way she talks. And so, yeah, I was just like, I want to see her face on this mural. Yes.
We're going to have to rectify that. And can you repeat her name once more? Just
Adrienne Mary Brown. Yeah, Adrienne. And I can hold you the book. And I don't have the book of Pleasure Activism right here because I just laid it in my office, but this is also a beautiful book by her.
Okay.
Yes, and I can really recommend. And it's really all about, connection, community, and creative reconstruction, finding new ways to do things that do not serve old patterns, and being vulnerable. And yeah, it's so good.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll link that in the show notes for sure.
And look, I think just in terms of old ways of reimagining old ways, I think that's part of our hope for this podcast. Again, it's quite niche. We're not expecting it to be beamed out to hundreds of thousands of people, but like for those who are traveling along on this journey to understand that there is more to play, and in that is to what does it mean for the corporate world. Like we're not, because everyone speaks of like paradigm change being kind of a systems thinking, it's the end of the iceberg where it's the fundamental component of the structure of the organization. It's essentially mental models as well. And for us, we're like just a slight incursion into a paradigm change of what does it mean to be a playful adult that is aware of the value of play. Because everyone's pitching for creativity and innovation. And our view is that there's a precursor to that. We've learned creativity and innovation through play. So just if we honor that, not that there's a huge capitalism now turns into something magical, but that.
Yeah, there is this fear of mine, right? That it turns kind of in a neoliberal capitalistic use of like, you also have to be playful, right? You have to be successful and, blah, blah, beautiful. So this like turn of it, I would not like to support. And I think it's a big issue today that there is this culture of we have to manage our own life, and if we are not happy enough, then it's our own fault, and then we kind of have to make it better, and then we have to find the strategies, and it's all on the individual, and it's very competitive, and I don't think that will create a good world. And I also want to, a bit fight against this, that everything always has to play into capitalism. And if we have an argument that it also serves, our productivity or something, or creativity, then we can use it. So, but I mean, I still think that, playfulness is a huge, I'm not sure if it's like a creative force. They go hand in hand somehow, right? So like in my studies, I have found that when you ask people to be playful, they think about like, oh, I also want to be going out of the box here. Like right there is a different. People try to extend into their adjacent possibles when they when they hear that term and when they come to grips with that, which promises new outcomes and stuff. But I think it's really this play in community and play and care in community that we need for the world to become a better place right now.
My question,
No,
your question?
I think it's me. This is the question actually we enjoy asking. Kat, can you explain your work to a 5-year-old?
In my work, I'm trying to explore. Is that a word that I can use for a 5-year-old? I can explore and hopefully facilitate art and creativity. So I'm a researcher, meaning like I work with and without experiments, but I'm trying to create situations that are interesting and in which I can observe and interact around the topics of my interest to find out more and to but also to enhance our capacities as humans. And what I, for example, really am very passionate about is to make museums fun places, like just as classrooms should be fun places, places that are welcoming, places in which you can, that are almost as good as Legoland, right? That in which you get like impressions that you otherwise didn't have, in which you can try out new ways of thinking and doing things, in which you can bring your bodies at play, right? Mm-hmm. These kind of things are my passion. And I would really like that every child and every adult has this attitude towards going to a museum of like, oh, this is going to be fun and I can do this. Like there's a lot of like anxiety around like a lot of these academic institutions to which museums unfortunately sometimes count, right? Like I thought that they're exclusive and you might not want to go into, or even if you really like it, you stand in there and they're like, will I understand today or not? And I want to provide strategies against that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what, having delved into your work on that, it started, we were talking about like, we're like, oh my goodness, like when you think of a museum, everything is so rigid and like even cool dinosaurs, you know, they're just like held in place, and then they're generally they're like a version of a library. You don't make a lot of noise. And then we're thinking, oh, like from your work, we're like, yeah, of course it's so quiet and it's non-interactive. And then we were even talking about this is probably less so nowadays, but like even when you go to a playground and there's a stake on the ground saying keep off the grass. And you were thinking, this is designed for adults. Yes. You know, all of this stuff is designed by adults, kind of for adults, or just a place to bring kids to keep them quiet. But
and also disembodied adults, right? I mean, yes. I mean, the best, when I go to the museum and they have guides, I always take the kids one because it's far more fun than the one for adults. I don't want to do the one for adults. Like it's not nice. I really think we have like created these spaces that are also, right, promoting value and telling you, you know, I mean, and that's part of that system, right? And of course we have to be careful because some art is worth a lot and some art cannot be touched and so on and so on. But I have been thrown out of museums because I brought a pencil for my daughter to do a drawing game, right? I mean, a pencil, it's totally crazy, right? Like, yeah, so this mistrust in people, that is also part of research often, right? That you are kind of like wiring them up, but you don't ask them proper questions because you can't trust them, and you also you don't interact because you don't want to disturb the objective sciences and so on. Yeah. And it creates completely weird situation in which nobody feels nice. It's like, yeah, so that's not what I want.
Again, like we want to honor your work. That's why we'd love to have you on and just commend you and commend all the researchers who are helping people reimagine public spaces to be more playful and interactive. So well done. You know, we're here championing you and everyone else on. To talk about your research, in your research study in 2018, participants were asked to perform a brick building task under 2 conditions. So number 1 was so that it feels as playful as possible. And then the other group were doing this task so that it does not feel playful at all. So do this in a playful manner, and the other one, no play. Can you elaborate on the research project? Because it was called Ducks in a Box.
I actually lost track why it was the box. I don't know where it was box, but like it was about we chose to have a count, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bricks with which you can build the famous Lego duck. And there is a stereotype that you could produce. And then we actually didn't have 2 groups, but we had 2 conditions where we gave and these were adults these bricks to the people. A lot of these sets, like 20 or something like that, in heaps. And then we said, would you build ducks with them? And would you do that as playful as possible or as not playful as possible? And the idea behind it was that we wanted to find out, can we actually, like, what is the people's concept of playfulness, right? Not mine. Like, I didn't explain them what I mean with playful, right? And is that a task that you can actually do, or is playfulness completely dependent on circumstances, right? Like, I mean, in the sense of, yeah, if it's a serious task or something, then you just can't do this or something like that. And the method that we used is, I think, important because that's a method that I mostly work with and that I'm super passionate about. It's called Micro-phenomenology, and it is an interview method in which you ask for a precise memory report about a few seconds. So what did you do when you got that task and how did you do that, right? And it basically asks for a memory report of your private stream of consciousness, not just retelling what I did. First I used that brick and then I used that brick, but more like, well, first I was like surprised about the task and then I thought, can I do that? And then I got this weird feeling of like, oh, something tickling up in me or something, like these things that we normally do not tell about, right? And also in so fine-grained detail. So if people tell me, oh, first I actually had to think about my brother because with him I always played Lego, then I would think, how did you think about them? And with this how, I didn't mean why. I meant like, did his face occur to you in your inner eye, or did you remember being on the ground and playing with Lego, or is it like more like an abstract sense of his, and if it's an abstract sense, how does it feel like? So really trying to dive into what a person lives in these milliseconds that we go through all the time, right? Yeah. And so with this, we approached this task so that we really had a detailed account of how people managed or not managed to accomplish this task, right? Yeah, with this aim to explore, like, can we do that? And if so, how?
Out of the more playfully orientated mindset, or what was the difference?
Yeah, so the playful mindset started out with people making themselves autonomous. So often saying like, okay, if it's to be playful, then I have to be my own boss. I have to get rid of, stress factors, right? So I don't want to think about time now or something like that, and I don't want to think about how it looks later or something. And I try to forget this experimenter in front of me, which is hard, right? Because the power hierarchy. But I'm just like going to do what I want. And actually, in some of the experiments that I did, that was to the extreme that people started to build cars or bridges. And when they explained it to me, I was like, why are you talking about a car? In the beginning, I didn't understand that their move was, I need to be completely free. So I even throw out the duck, right? So it's like, it was very strong, that response. That was the first thing, autonomy. And that didn't experimental room or something, or if they had a bad day and couldn't get that autonomy, right? Like then it failed already here. Mm-hmm. And then the second step was that when they got autonomous, then they also had the second thought of, okay, let's do something different, like not just build that duck, right? Maybe I start with a duck that I know to get autonomous, to feel self-confident, I can do this, but then I forget about it and then I do whatever I want, right? So there is this out of the box creativity thing in there. But then the most important stage was actually when they engaged with the bricks in the way that this agency melting thing happened. So often they said something and then the bricks took over. Right. So, this moment when you start fidgeting with something and you're just like, oh, this could also, and then it breaks. And okay, but that actually allows me to do something else. Right. These like moments where you give away your plan. Yes, you have one and you can come back to it, but now you just feel out. And I think often when we think of Lego, also we still know how it feels like, right? These very soft edges and then the the edges of it, and the pressure that it needs to press, and these kind of things that then come to consciousness. It's actually an aesthetic experience. It's very close to an art experience in my sense, in my feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's also related to a lot of my other work. So when you have passed through this stage, or when you are in this stage, then what happens is you get surprised because you produce things that you did not plan to produce. So you get surprised by your own or your and the bricks actions, right? They're not totally your own anymore, and that's fine. And this surprise, like, oh, a duck can look like this, or oh, the feet could that could also be feet. That then gets to this, like, it was me that did that. Like, not only, but also me, right? And so then there's this, oh, let's try again what I can do. And so this kind of like leads to this circle of intrinsic motivation. There's no need anymore of the task. If I then stop, the 5 minutes are over, they're like, yeah, okay, but I just want to build this one more time, right? It's like, then you go into this loop, and looping over, retrying, that's the best moment of learning, right? And that's why you could make that argument, if you don't want to abuse it, right, in the neoliberal system, that play serves learning, because you can get into these intrinsic moments of experimenting and tinkering.
Absolutely. And again, I would say, from what we think we bring in terms of Lego serious play is a feedback loop. Like, I think oftentimes in the corporate space, a project will take a number of months and it never feels complete because there's another project that you now have your eye on, and you've been looking at that following project or multiple projects, and the feedback mechanism, again, this is a complete hypothesis, but like, we feel that there's the feedback mechanism, like within 5 or 6 minutes of building something and seeing it realized, that process that you said, that looping is missing in the corporate sense, in that, like, people have 100 tabs open, so you never have the one tab with the one focus, with the one outcome. You're multitasking, you've got multiple projects, our attention, our ability to feel like something is looped and closed and has a sense of accomplishment, we think is part of a lacking of an understanding of what is well-being in the workplace. It's a felt sense of something coming to its conclusion where you've given your all and it is realized.
And I mean, I work with some actually almost like corporates, like, for example, Studio Olafur Eliasson, this big artist studio in Berlin, with, like, Olafur, I think, has, now I'm not quite sure, but I think over 200 people that he works with at the same time, right? And that is actually one of these things that they are so amazing in. They're constantly experimenting and trying it out and looking at it and putting it away. Also, and they do have multiple projects at the same time. I don't know how they actually manage that, but there is a culture around this experimentation, and the culture around that failure is part of it. Like, so perfectionism, that doesn't really mix well with playfulness, right? Like, I mean, unless it's a motto for experimentation.
It's true.
I'm actually going to move on to your question, because Kat, you very kindly covered off the 4 stepping stones, so I'm not going to ask you to recap on them. So I am going to talk to you about a paper that you co-wrote called From What Is to What If to Let's Try, a treasure box for the playful academic. So Kat, can you explain why this paper needed to be written?
Yes, so this paper is really co-written by me and Annika Lubert and Pedro Fernandez Gonzalez, and I really and I think the original push for writing it came from Annika, who is very immersed in the topic and also has published another beautiful paper this year about it with other colleagues, and it comes from the sense that academia lacks some playfulness often. Academia has become a quite difficult machine, right? Where you, as a researcher, are assessed by a competitive publication record, where you have multiple projects at the same time, and you are pushed to produce your individual niche and research, which actually makes you quite a bad teacher. And often, because you need other qualities to be a teacher, right? And often also not a really nice colleague. And we had this feeling that we wanted to give toolbox to work against that. So Annika actually infected me with these positive approaches to, rather than complaining about the environment that we're in and like deconstructing it, to basically say what would help us to bring it into the place that we actually would like to work in and sometimes work in. I mean, it depends on the colleagues that you're in and the project that you're in. You can actually create that very easily. And so we decided to make an effort and create some short tasks that you can put in front of collaboration sessions or Zoom sessions where you have to talk about paper or something like that, to allow for the conditions of playfulness to arise or to be fostered. These 4 steps to all allow them, right? To give people space, to allow them to be creative, to allow them to really engage, to be vulnerable, to bring in their bodies, right? In this sense, and that's what we did in that paper. Yes.
And yeah, we really enjoyed it. Again, it brought in 4E cognitive science, or 4E plus A affect as well, and to kind of framing it that way, how necessary, again, you're a part of an ecology. And even just one line was, that students have been considered a lot, but researchers and academics have not. Like that simple line was like, yeah, like why aren't academics thinking about themselves as much? And yeah, the focus is on student centricity, and we find even with the work we do, it's oftentimes it's customer centricity, but for us, we're saying, let's think and talk about your employees as well. Like, yes, student, yes, customer, but also who are these people that have to make this thing run, make the workplace work. So yeah, it's a really good paper, and I think any academic will link it to the show notes, but certainly needs to read it. So we asked you to build some Lego. We posted it to you, and you very kindly accepted. And we're always thankful of people, just one, turning up to the show for a conversation, and two, if their schedules can take it, actually taking time to build.
It's definitely a bonus. So thank you.
It's our bonus.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed doing your builds.
So the question was, what inspires you about your work? What keeps you curious and motivated? Would you mind showing the lovely listeners, but you can see this via Spotify.
This, and it was, this when you have something in mind, you want to build this, it breaks apart. But I have built something that kind of like is hopefully what I wanted to build. And so what it's supposed to be is actually the feeling that I have when I am working to my best. So it shows a bright red, like beautiful, warm, like huge wave that rises from my lower belly through my entire, upper torso and splashes like, over me almost. It's this rise of joy and motivation that I feel when I'm collaborating and learning. And I mean, that's my motivation, that academia allows me to learn every day again, right? That I never have to finish my education and just apply it, which I don't think anybody does anyways, but it is really a space where you always have to grow. And this wave is crucially depending on other people. And it's crucially depending actually also on people that are not like me, because these are the people that bring me to the edges of my understandings, right? Because they have the perspective that I don't have, and that I only get when I listen to them. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show here. And these were some of the figures that were in the boxes. I have to say that I am not a big fan of Friends. I like that they have their diversity profile, their different skin colors, and some wear glasses or something. But the body image is terrible. What they did to make it appeal to girls is to tiny their waists and to make the legs not move anymore. These cannot move. Anyways, they have different colors and they show diversity. So I decided to put them in here as to relate to my amazing colleagues that actually in their hands kind of push the wave up, right? Like let it rise so it can splash and hopefully embrace them and bring in bring that joy force, productive force, right, out for all of us. Yeah,
that's beautiful. It's a very phenomenological description. Abdul would be very proud of you. He would say, "Well done for conceptualizing phenomenology through the medium of Lego." Well done.
Good.
Thank you again. Thank you for taking time out of a busy schedule, but then also to devote time to build that and conceptualize it. We really appreciate it.
Now, this isn't about a build. I'm not going to ask you to build anything else, but I see how excited you are when you talk about your work and how passionate you are. So, Kat, can I ask you, how do you think your work helps people think and feel differently about the world?
I mean, in my research work, I'm trying to explore people's experience and to find the format to allow to disseminate and communicate that experience to others, right? In these interviews, people try to really, find words for these waves or winds or things that they have in there, or imaginations or multi-sensorial synesthetic experiences that they live through. But also not all of them are just purely aesthetic. They're often very political. They're often very, they can be tough, sad, all of that. And but they really, for me, have allowed me the entrance into another person's world. And I have to say that the best way to do it is to do the interviews, because one of the technique of the interview that I find it really is one of the things that I have been astonished most about is that as an interviewer, because you don't want to prime people, you actually are only allowed to repeat their own words. So a large part of the interview, I'm actually like frantically scribing down what other people are saying. And then I read this out back to them. And in this moment, their voice becomes my voice, right? And something happens to me if my body speaks their words. And often I have the feeling of that I at least know what I did not understand before. Like, it's not that I totally know what they lived through, but I'm just like, oh, this is not how I live this, right? Like, this is different. And this way of like bringing out differences, showing other perspectives is what I hopefully do with my research work. And in my teaching work, I want to actually produce this type of listening. And that is one thing, like that I would like to give students tools to engage in that way with others, but even with a book. You can do that with a book. You have to trust your own way of like every word kind of like moves you, pushes you, lets you stumble. These things of interacting while really listening and responding to that is really helpful for students and for knowledge acquisition and for your life. I mean, listening, I think, is a huge part of what our world needs. And then I also want to convey my passion, because I mean, my work is so meaningful to me that it lets me survive, right? Like it's a constant motor of joy and power, and it's so pleasurable, right? And I would love if everybody could have that with what they are doing, right? Because it's like the best way of being. So yeah,
that is fantastic.
It's the best way of being.
I think
I think we should end on that.
Yeah.
Like,
say what
it's the best way of being.